No doubt the most important piece of evidence that this jury will use to determine if this was self-defense and a justifiable killing or if it was manslaughter, as Latham is charged with. Let's bring into the conversation criminal defense attorney and former public defender Michael Jaafar in Dearborn, Michigan, and in New York, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Marie Pereira. Thank you both for being with us. Marie, let me start with you. We heard the prosecution when they were asking those direct examination questions of Billy Durham on the stand. They started with the trespass and the aggravated assault charges that he has pending. He's working on a diversion program where they'll be expunged when he's done with what's likely community service. Does that extinguish or explain what happened that day? Is he consenting to the violence that could have come out of a brawl that he was a part of? Or is this something that the prosecution can successfully say that the defense doesn't have a claim for self-defense?
I think that the state has a really high burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the force used against the deceased was not justified. And every time I see those videos, I feel like the videos are working against the state. As far as them bringing out the fact that there's a prior crime being charged against the witness on the stand, I think it was good for them to preempt that, because at the end of the day, when a witness takes a stand, his prior criminal history, accusations will come up. So they brought it up to take the sting out of it, because on cross, it's going to come up. But these videos are making the uphill climb against the prosecutors extremely hard, even though the defendant is extremely unlikable. The videos are helping the defendant, I feel.
Now, the unlikable part of this, Michael, the witness on the stand says he saw his mother get hit, and then there was this reaction. Is there a danger at all of there being jury nullification, realizing that these are sons and a father, a husband, who is reacting to an assault on the mother, who we also heard take the stand, very emotional testimony? Do you worry that the jury might not strictly follow the law and look at self-defense, but say, look, this was a man who was just trying to defend his wife, and it should not have ended in death?
So what I will say is I'm stunned at the demeanor of this defendant, because this is his case to lose, right? So there's a video showing him standing in his garage and warning the people that are attacking him. His family member was telling him, you don't like what he's going to have for you, right? But his demeanor is so awful. Just look at the picture of this kid. He just looks, I feel bad for saying this, he kind of looks like a demon a little bit, right? Whereas the witnesses for the prosecution are emotional, they're crying. This kid has to show a little bit more empathy. Now, obviously, I'm not in the mind of his attorneys. Maybe they told him this, but he's not capable of showing empathy. But look at this kid. I mean, he just does not look bad. There's a jury in the same room as this kid at this point. There's a jury looking at him. They're watching. We're seeing it on camera, but they're seeing him in person. Several jurors are seeing that face that we're seeing on camera right now. He's got to show some empathy. This is his case to lose, right? And all he has to do is show some empathy. And it'll go a long way, because these jurors are human beings. They're not robots. They're going to make these decisions in a closed room. We're not going to be there when they're deliberating. They might not even verbalize their concerns to one another. But I can tell you right now, every single juror is seeing this kid, and they're seeing the lack of empathy. A man was murdered, even if you believe you were defending yourself, right? You've got to show some empathy. You know, there's an ending of human life. You got to show some empathy, and he's not showing any.
The optics are huge, especially in a case like this, where it could hinge on really what the jurors feel he was thinking at the time, because prosecution is accusing him of luring these family members to his house, and that's something that you could only figure out if you're inside of his mind or making a decision of it. Marie, he was 18 years old at the time. We heard this discussion on the video of the initial incident with the wife, where they're saying he's 18. The defense wants to say that they're saying he's 18, he's old enough to basically take a butt whooping. And the defendant now sitting in the courtroom, he's 20, he's turning 21 soon. How does age impact how a jury is going to handle this?
Age is very impactful because the younger the defendant is, the more mitigators there are, because you can argue that he was just really young and unable to control his impulses. His brain is not fully developed until he's 25, so he made bad choices. But I want to agree with Michael. There is a demonic vibe to his presence in that courtroom, and he would help himself if he seemed a little bit more remorseful in his demeanor. But at the end of the day, he is cloaked in a presumption of innocence. And I think that his attorneys on closings should point out the fact that no matter if you like him or not, the state still has to bear the burden of proving that his actions that day were unreasonable. He had no right to defend himself, and they have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt that he used excessive force and it was unnecessary. And I think jury nullification is the only way that the state is going to get around that, because those videotapes, as terrible as they are leaning towards proving that he feared for his life, as demonic as he looks.
I think you're right with that, Marie. First of all, terrible is the best word to describe that scene. And on either side, it doesn't really look like one or the other is winning or losing, or should be there or shouldn't be there. But I think when you're looking at beyond a reasonable doubt for this defendant, this video shows that he really didn't have time to retreat, time to get away, and there are those verbal warnings that were made. Let's take a listen back to Catherine Durham on the stand. She was an emotional witness testifying about her husband who was killed in this. She is the mother of the witness that we're hearing from now when court gets back in session. Let's take a listen.
He got in his truck and turned around and then drove down there.
Now, as far as turned around, can you describe what he did to turn his vehicle around?
He would have had to pull up back into the driveway and then turn around to go down the other direction.
What did you do after you had fallen back and landed on the ground?
Then I walked down there.
Why did you walk as opposed to run?
I had flip-flops on.
Were you able to hear anything as you were walking down the road towards the residence?
Just screaming.
Okay. Were you able to identify who was screaming?
No.
When you got down to the driveway of 2986, where did you go?
Towards the screaming, into the garage. I went right to the garage.
What did you see as you were walking up to the garage?
There was blood everywhere.
Where was the blood at? You say everywhere. I mean, was there any place in particular that your attention was drawn to?
I saw blood on the ground, but I couldn't see exactly who was bleeding, what was bleeding, and it was blocked because Sarah was standing there videoing.
So upon seeing Sarah, did you know exactly what was going on at that moment?
No.
What did you then do?
I pulled Sarah away.
Okay. Where did you grab Sarah?
By her head.
And what happened after you grabbed Sarah by her head?
Then her and I were fighting.
At some point during the course of that fight with Sarah, was there anybody else that got involved in that particular fight?
Yes.
Do you know who that was?
No.
Do you know what they were wearing?
A white shirt.
During the course of that fight, and once the other individual with the white shirt got involved, did that fight eventually end?
Yes.
What caused that fight to end?
I'm not sure. I think I was hit with the stick, and then Billy came out and said we had to get Dad was real bad, and we had to get him to the hospital.
Chaos in this neighborhood is all you hear from this testimony. The men are fighting in the garage. The women are fighting in the driveway. Michael, we almost heard from her. We thought we were going to hear from Sarah, the defendant's wife, but she declined to testify as a prosecution witness. We also heard today about the grandparents of this defendant who were inside of the house. He was living with them. What are some of the challenges for the prosecution being able to bring these witnesses, family members of the defense, as their witnesses? Wouldn't they just be able to subpoena them?
They could. I don't know why they didn't subpoena them. And I also don't know why the prosecution wants her to testify on their behalf. And I mean, that to me sounds a little bit odd, because she was recording the video. So yeah, the prosecution, they have, immense power. They can issue a subpoena. If you don't show up to court, they can hold you for contempt of court and they can arrest you. So, I mean, prosecutors don't want to do that. They don't want to arrest their witnesses, but they could. They have that power. So why this woman was able to decline to testify, it must have been a voluntary thing. They must have asked her to testify. She said she didn't want to testify. And so they made a strategic decision that if she doesn't want to testify, she's not going to help our case. And so we're not going to bring her. The prosecution have a ton of stuff to deal with in this case. Her not testifying is not gonna, it was either gonna help them or hurt them. They made a decision that it would hurt them, and they made a decision to move on.
And maybe we will hear from her once this case passes to the defense. We are going to fit in a break. Michael and Marie, stand by. We see some movement inside of that courtroom, so we might be getting things underway when we come back, but don't go anywhere.